Do you ever wonder what it really means to be human? That beyond the routines, the masks, and the daily hustle, there's a raw, messy, and beautiful reality unfolding right before our eyes. I'm Rick Watson, and this is Humaning, a podcast where I have honest conversations with everyday humans, and together we peel back the layers, dive into the chaos, and celebrate the magic of just being human. As you listen, notice how different parts of your story may appear in the story of others as we all just do our best to live, to feel, and to connect. Welcome to Humaning. Katia Erokhina, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We've been here before, haven't we? We have sat in these chairs together.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a bit bad because we did an amazing podcast a week ago
We did.
and the audio didn't work. My software ate the audio and we sounded like we had COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think I was holding on to the hope of that might be okay. And I asked you to send me the recording.
Yeah.
And I think I had an appointment and I just couldn't wait. I was late for my appointment because I just wanted to listen and to be sure. And then my first reaction was like, yep, we need to do it again.
And the beautiful irony of this was a lot of what we spoke about was like perfectionism, being imperfect, and letting go of control, and all these little things in a therapy setting and in life. And then we got the universe allowed us to test some of those theories out, didn't it?
Yeah, and it was almost like you got to make the choice. Do I let the imperfect out or not? And I think we were very much on the same page. It was like, let's just do it again. So here we are doing it again.
Here we are.
And I asked you just a few seconds ago, I asked you this question about it feels harder for me now to do it second time. And I'm like, why? What is in?
Is it expectation?
Maybe.
Because the other thing is, the original one was pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
Like we were both excited about it.
Yeah, well, maybe it's that. Maybe I'm like, wow, how can I
meet my own expectations? So we'll try. We'll do our best. My experience of the second time round is it's normally a little bit deeper than the first one.
Let's bring the deepness in. Yeah.
So to just drop in a little bit, let's just do a little check-in. How is it to be you right now?
I have that sense of real stillness, which I didn't notice until you asked me the question. And with that, I also have a lot of kind of swirling thoughts about what do I say? It's a podcast. You know a little bit about me already. What do I bring? How am I? So this is kind of a really two different aspects of me are very present right now. So the one that's like just trying to gather a sense of how this conversation is going to go and what I'm bringing. And another one, and I lean into that, the other one, which is a more stiller part, because I really want to be present here. And if we can do it better, I don't want to push myself to do it better, but I want to be present enough and let the conversation unfold so it is better.
Yeah. Oh, I have questions already. Just the whole idea of like, what does it mean? What do you make it mean to be better? Like what's in us that wants it to be better? But it's a bit of deviation.
Yeah, let's go there a bit later.
Okay.
Because we end up there. We're going to end up there, I know.
Yeah. Anything else check-in wise?
Yeah, I think that's good enough for now.
Cool. I've just come off we're recording this in the afternoon. I've come off a pretty solid day of clients. And I am bubbling and alive and activated.
Mm,
And yeah, I also had a coffee about 2 o'clock. So I think those two things are combining. Like my heart's a bit racy
mm,
from a
mm,
physical point of view, but I also feel the energy of the day, like the uplifting energy of the day that I often
mm,
get from clients.
mm,
And there's a similarity around the need for it to be better.
mm,
But I think I've dropped into a little bit of trust on that.
mhm,
Like, oh, let's just trust to see what comes out.
mhm,
So there's a bit of peace in that
mhm,
jitteriness.
mhm.
Um, yeah, I had a really nice day yesterday exploring the concept of unearned rest,
Mm,
which is a little bit of work for me around like this concept of I have to earn my rest
mm,
and how that's attached to my worthiness. So yesterday was
mm,
a dedicated day of unearned rest. And I had some things to do. I had study group and a few
mm,
life things, but it was so nourishing to put away the measuring stick and just so what that looked like for me was like making a coffee in the morning, coming back to bed, having a conversation with my partner, not being rushed to do things, coming home after study group and actually
mm,
doing nothing, just sitting on the couch and watching something and then going out for dinner. But I didn't feel like I had to earn that.
mm,
And it was such a unique experience,
mm.
but really one that I really enjoyed.
It's interesting how and there's all these sort of in gestalt therapy, and I want to just draw back to that because we both, I've just finished my gestalt therapy course in my
Mhm.
master's, and you're halfway,
Second year, yep.
second year. So there'll be some. I want to introduce a couple of things,
Mm,
from gestalt therapy, and one of them is the interject, the things that get put installed, in our kind of at the back of our mind, that that sounded like
mm,
that piece about that I have to earn, I have to justify me resting.
mm.
That sounds a lot like an introject, something that I
Oh, it's 100%.
yeah, that's like, something that has no relevance to the real functioning of a human being, but
Yeah.
somehow it's like, well, I have to do something before I can let myself rest. And I think this is just sort of the hallmark of our culture
Mm,
and our dominant culture that we live in.
mm.
Just that, I'm already exhausted just from acknowledging it. I'm already like, melting in my chair and going, "Whoa,
Yeah.
this is tiring."
Because the other side of that for me is like that my worthiness is attached to productivity,
Mm,
which is, the doing part of it,
mm,
as opposed to like
mm,
the giving permission for rest part. And this came up last week talking with my therapist, and I was really pissed off because I feel like I've done so much work on the worthiness part
mm,
and feeling worthy and well, needing, that's a tough word. Trying to embody the unconditional worthiness
mm,
of just being
mm,
me, of being the imperfect human that I
mm,
am. And I felt like last year there was some real signposts that said I was heading in the right direction.
mm.
And then this some stuff this month has just snuck up on me. And I was so frustrated that it snuck up on me. I was just like, fuck you. I thought we'd done this.
That
I thought we
it
were
tends to
sorted.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it tends
So
to
it's been a
happen.
really humbling process to
Mm,
be like, okay, I see you guys, you're still there. And that's okay.
mm.
Mm.
That's cool sharing.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's my check in.
Mm.
Mm.
Yours had so much in it. I just felt like I didn't bring enough. I feel like, again, see, this is the theme here. I'm like, oh, I needed to bring a little bit more of
Mm.
myself here.
What else do I bring?
Mm.
right now. It's
Mhm.
floating around. So I think for context,
Yeah.
because we're slowly getting to know each other,
Mhm.
and I do like to start these with like, how did we cross paths? How did we meet?
Mhm.
Just to set a little bit of context. What's your version of that story?
So, we met at the residential, which is a gestalt study intensive. It happened in Gatton. And yeah, I had a task. I was observing your session. You were a client
Mhm.
with a practicing therapist in the third year. And my task was to step into a supervisor role, and give feedback to the therapist who was, um, yeah, yeah, the
Yeah,
therapist in a session with you. And yeah, and that was pretty much how I first met you
which
without actually meeting you.
yeah, which if you think about it,
It was not a normal
witnessing
way.
someone in a therapy session as the first time you've ever seen them or met them or anything is a fucking weird way to meet.
It is. I know. And here we are. I mean, look, clearly, um, yeah, and I think that session was incredible in many ways. Just
Yeah, I still
witnessing
remember
that,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it is a very strange setting to meet people. The whole Gestalt residential, and it's not a very normal way to meet people. I suppose
Mm.
you're there on campus. Your brain is flooded with information. Your body's flooded with sensations of being around people and themes, and you know all of that. So yeah, it is a strange way to meet someone, and yet I'm very glad that I met you there, and
Mm.
then somehow we connected on social media, and here I am.
Mm. And I think that's where I stepped in because
Mm.
my version of that was yes, that was our first contact, and that first contact seemed a bit blurry to me because there's so
Mm.
much going on in those
Mm.
things, and that was my first experience
Mm.
sitting in the client chair in a CTO ever. So
Client therapist observer.
yes, client
Yes.
therapist observer. So being the client for the first time. Um, so it was a bit blurry, but
Mm.
then after it was like, oh, I know. I put a name to a face and got to experience your feedback for the
Mhm.
therapist, and so there was a little bit of that. And then I think we connected on social media, and
Mm.
I noticed that obviously I saw that you were graduating, but you were also moving into starting your own practice,
Mm.
and it's something that I'm passionate about. I'm interested in.
Mhm.
Like I'd really love to have you on the podcast.
Mm.
A, because of the experience that you've been through to get there, and also that we're aligned in what we do moving
Mhm.
forward. So there's just this kind of a little bit of parallel
Mhm.
interest, I
Mhm.
guess. But I think before we jump into future or present, I kind of like to go back, and
Mm.
it feels a bit strange because in a way we've already had this conversation
Mhm.
and that didn't work out.
Mhm.
But I do find the movement from civilian life to wanting to be a therapist a really
Mm.
interesting
Mhm.
process, and I'm interested in yours.
Mm. Mm.
So how did that work for you?
Yeah, and it's almost like there are certain questions when you think to yourself, well, I think to myself now, like, how far do I go answering that?
Mm,
And I'm gonna bring a moment from I was 14 years old. Um, I was born in Russia. I grew up in Moscow, and I remember myself. I'm a 14-year-old girl, and I walk out to walk a dog quite late at night, and it's it's winter, and the snow is everywhere. It's a dark street with a bit of street lights, So, and I remember looking up in the sky and thinking, none of it makes sense. Like, none of it. Like, the 14-year-old who was meant to, I don't know, certainly not think about this stuff.
Mm.
I don't know, maybe my sense in retrospect, I'm thinking, wow, like I was really burdened with existential questions
Yeah.
very early on in life.
Yep.
And, you know, uh, my family situation was really tough. So that definitely shaped some of it. But even if I go even further, it's almost like I do not remember a point in my life where I wasn't bothered by questions of existence from very, very early
Mm.
age. And I could say it could be cultural, but I think it also could be just largely who I am.
Yeah. Yep.
So that piece just really answers a lot
Yeah.
without how or, what happened.
Mm.
There's something in me that part of me always wanted deeper understanding of existential
Yeah.
questions, existential, existence, us being here.
Mm.
Um, and the second piece of it was, and I'm seeing you have already something happening for you, and I'm
Yeah. No.
naming that. You're
No.
like, oh,
The little existential 14-year-old in me is excited about meeting the existential 14-year-old because I really have some similarities of like
wow, yeah.
that experience of like the curiosity of the bigger questions.
Mm.
Continue. Sorry.
No, yeah. Let's welcome them both.
Mm.
Yeah, they did a lot of work for us, didn't
Yeah.
they? Um, so I remember the thing what I was really confused about is how so many things can coexist in on the same kind of in the same reality.
Yeah.
That didn't make any sense. And at times, I think even now I'm 38 now, and I get similar sense of like, whoa, what's happening here? What is this all about?
Mm.
How is that there is such contradiction in just being here? And I think and I often end up in conversations about death and dying and that whole paradoxes that it's meant to happen, and yet I'm here fully living and experiencing life. And um but 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 yeah, like even that, even the fact that I'm so aware and no one's getting out of here alive, and that the book up there, we're all going to die, are just above you on a bookshelf.
Yeah.
So that is, and I think maybe at times I feel like that's underneath all these questions. There was that, like, maybe I realized I felt lost very early on. I felt lack of support very early on. Like, I don't think necessarily for me that the curiosity came from having a very nurtured and calm
Yeah. Right.
upbringing, but the sort of there is another side to it, that I was very early on mesmerized by the beauty of the world and the
Mm.
details, and kind of like almost like a sense of magic.
Mm.
And that came from a different place, I think.
Yep.
And on top of wondering what the heck's happening, as a 14-year-old, I also noticed the stars in the sky in Moscow at night. I noticed stars. There were not many, but there were
Yeah.
some stars.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that they're twinkling, those stars, they were twinkling. And I thought, wow, this is really comforting and kind of beautiful. And I had this connection, at times in my life where I'd look up and think, oh, the stars are twinkling, like something greater than me in the universe, having its own, a completely own thing, you
Yeah.
know?
I imagine that
Mm,
contrast of that setting of Moscow, your family, and then these glimpses of beauty and it's not like enchantment or magic in some
mm.
capacity. They're so they're so contrasting.
There's another piece that I've learned only last year. I found a letter from my grandmother to her cousin, and I've never read this letter before. My grandmother, she was also born in Moscow, and she lived through Second World War.
Yep.
And when she was 14 years old, she was actually taken from where she was, somewhere around Kiev, a Kiev countryside. She was with, they had a family home, and she was there for holidays from Moscow.
Yep.
And when the Nazi Germany invaded, they've taken a lot of young girls back to Berlin to work for some kind of labor,
Yep.
and so we're reading. So I was, reading the letters between two young women separated by war from their families and each other, and
How old were you when you were reading this?
just last year.
Yeah, right.
And what was the most surprising, that what they're saying to each other, there's a phrase there, and they're saying to each other, "Hey, do you remember we were in the countryside and we were looking at the twinkling stars?" And my grandmother is saying, yes, and like there is a sense of like, oh, what the twinkling stars, like that. So that was there
Mm.
so long ago, and I got a sense that it was their support, like leaning in something bigger was their support, because
Mm.
there's not much else to lean on to.
Finding beauty in the suffering.
Well, yeah, or almost like, uh, even a sense that, at times I think we don't have much, we don't have much to lean on to,
Yeah.
apart from something bigger than us.
Yeah. Also.
And that is, and I'm not, I don't, so it's not a religious sense, but it's the most profound way of sort of feeling like I am connected to what's outside of
Mm.
me. And I think there's moments, like almost like, if I bring gestalt therapy in these moments, there might be moments of that insight or inspiration or that creativity, even in the middle of, something quite tragic
Yeah.
or a very lonely experience. And when I invite clients to go to that space, I could kind of see the shift in them.
Yeah.
Like, can you notice the trees outside? Can you notice how the wind kind of, moves?
So that little 14-year-old still
Yeah.
showing up for you.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
Mm.
She's still getting to ask the questions, isn't she?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. I think that's how I ended up doing this.
Yeah.
Because I think I've asked the questions long enough, that I felt like I've accumulated the resource and the capacity to hold others in those experiences. Because ultimately, what I've learned about human experience is that when people come to therapy, this is ultimately when they're like, oh, I don't know anymore, I need help. And the questions are, is this okay? Am I okay? How do I deal with this?
Yeah.
Am I enough? Am I this and am I that? How do I, like there's all these, there's a struggle there.
Mm.
And I think, maybe the pieces here is that I've wrestled with my own questions long enough.
Yeah.
And also, being a client in long-term therapy right now, that's the path I've chosen. Some people choose short-term therapy. Some people choose all sorts of, other modalities, techniques. My way of creating a part of me that I can lean into for support, that was my choice to go into long-term therapy. And that happened in 2014, 2015, 14. So that's how long it's been.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine that's, and you just, I'll try this out and tell
Mm.
me if it feels true or
Mm.
not. But I imagine that's given you a greater sense of self, of who you are in the world and the patterns that you have and how you show up. And
Mm. Mm.
yeah, because I think that's a really interesting aspect of therapy, is the type of therapy someone can do when they have a developed sense of self,
Mm.
as opposed to learning stuff that they're
Mm. Well, it became experiential
Mm.
for me, um, rather than, sitting there with my thoughts or reading books about it. And, my initial, I suppose before therapy, you know, I kind of got into yoga and meditation, and I don't know, there was a sense of that, yes, and somehow a lot of things that can help and help me to get to a place of clarity were kind of completely disregarding those parts of me that needed to come out to light most.
Yep.
And when I came, to see to my first session with gestalt therapist, and she 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 showed me something completely different,
Yeah.
and I'm still seeing her up until today.
What was different about it?
It is it is a moment of, twinkling stars. It is a moment where it's it and the gestalt therapy method itself works because it's not, it might not be, there might be like so many great people in the world and so many great modalities, but I felt like, you know who she is and the method that she she uses and she used at that first session, which is
Hmm.
gestalt and, some other somatic practices and bit of psychoanalysis, and um, that that allowed me to have an experience where I felt that those parts that I had to, like, kind of, put aside or kind of,
Yep.
oh, no, that's not what I like, they were invited into the space, into the therapeutic space, and that felt good and scary and overwhelming, and I remember I was, like, weeping for the first, like, I don't know, 10 sessions or 20 sessions, I don't know, just, like, curled up in a ball and just, like, on a couch and, like, raw.
Yep.
Um yeah, and this connection with her means a lot to me because she's met the helpless version of me.
Yep.
She's met the very scared version of me, the very shameful version of me, the version of me that was really ashamed of her upbringing and her parents and so many other things.
Yep.
It seems very valuable. Mm,
Yeah. Because it's kind of, I'm assuming that it's like the first point of evidence that these parts of you can be
mm,
brought out and
mm,
invited in and,
mm,
hung out with
mm,
rather than pushed away.
mm,
Yeah. So what was the, this is a hard question to answer, but I'll throw it out anyway.
Let's try.
Yeah. What was like the knock on effect of like starting to bring those parts for you? Like, yeah, what impact did that have?
My main learning, and this is something that my therapist says a lot, that my main learning was that I was inherently, always trying to find ways to be more okay
Mm.
and be happier and be more content,
Mm.
which I think a lot of people come to therapy for that, right? Like it is a very normal
Mm.
thing to want.
Yep.
Um, but throughout my journey, my therapeutic journey, I've learned that it's actually not about happiness. It's about creating a space where I have choice and freedom.
I'm
And
smiling.
that excites me.
Yeah.
And that, because that allows so much more to come in,
Mm.
you know, that allowed, I don't have the exact, oh, I got this is improved and this has
Yeah,
got
yeah,
better and
yeah.
I got this and I got that.
I kind
Well,
of don't care about that stuff.
yeah,
I
like
think this
it's,
is what we're getting at.
yeah,
Yeah.
I could probably say multiple things about that. That, I got a dog. I said I'll never get a dog. I had this thing about, this is. I don't know what I had in my head about, that, but I got a dog. Like, I don't know. And I have this
Mm.
most beautiful connection with this little animal. But this was only, and I became friends with people on such great deep level. I've never, the depth of just the intimacy with others, with myself, that changed,
Yeah.
you know.
I want to swing back to
Mm.
that whole theme of what I didn't get. I didn't get kind of what I thought I would,
Mm.
which was like the happiness, contentment. I got choice and I got freedom.
Mm.
And as soon as you said that, like, I really felt that, because choice for me is really, it's a really big one, because the opposite of
Mm.
choice is feeling stuck
Mm.
and feeling like I have no control over getting unstuck.
Mhm. Helplessness.
Yeah,
Mm.
helplessness.
Mm.
So, um, yeah, having that outcome being choice and freedom just feels so spacious,
Mm.
because, if we then look at what are the knock on effects, I met these beautiful people, I have these nice connections, I have this amazing dog, like I've opened up this new career, like I have choice and freedom
Mm.
are fucking powerful things to have.
Mm.
And
Mm.
the other side of that is that's really challenging when we feel like we don't have choice and freedom.
Mm. And at times, I imagine that, the life situations can be such that there's no choice.
Mm,
And then but then I can choose how I engage with that point, you
mm,
know. I still don't have the habitual like, that interjects that we mentioned. I imagine that to me, the process was unlearning everything I've learned so I can actually get rid of those habitual responses
mm,
and engage with whatever is happening for me in the most meaningful way.
yeah,
And I do. And I feel like I experience things fully. And it's not about filtering, oh, these things I want to experience fully because they're good.
yeah.
And these things I don't want to experience fully because they're quite unpleasant. That's not even the thing anymore. Like, I'm experiencing them all.
You welcome everything.
Yeah.
Mm,
And this is how I am. And maybe not everyone is like that.
yeah.
And that's okay. But this is my way of being in a world where if I disown those parts of me that I don't like,
Hmm.
that's going to damage me even more. So, my way of being in the world, and that I've learned that way through this long-term therapy
Yep.
of exploring and reflecting and feeling really supported
Mm.
by my therapist, was that. And that's what inspired me ultimately, to go and pursue the career in that field and in gestalt therapy.
Because it felt so meaningful for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I suppose that, it's like, can I just say, well, it felt meaningful to me enough that I decided I'm going to go and do my master's in gestalt therapy.
Yeah.
And it's almost like part of me thinks, well, is that enough? Do you know what credentials do you have? you know?
Mm,
And, I think that being human ultimately entitles us to show up for other humans, but also being human in a way that where, I went through the process of unpacking my history and deep reflection, and I have words around it. And
mm,
maybe when clients come, to see us, to see me, to see you, they might not have words around their experience yet.
yeah.
So where I can go, I can say, well, I have words and I have the depth
Mm.
to hold something here and support.
Because you've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not that, oh, well, I've been there, therefore I know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Not like that.
It's more I've been there and I understand what it feels like.
Yeah.
Mm,
I can go to that depth with you
mm,
And I think it's very healthy. I don't like when people say, "Oh, well, why do you need therapists? I can go talk to my mom or my friend."
Mm.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes we do need someone who's actually trained to explore something, and in a sense that we don't. And I love that about Gestalt, where we kind of don't have a huge agenda, when clients come in.
Mm.
No, you're laughing, you're
I
smiling. Yeah,
just
it's great, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's also like
Mm,
it's my transitional work from my old career in the fitness
mm,
industry to moving more into like holistic coaching, and now therapy is
mm,
attempting as best I can to drop the agenda.
mm,
So that's why I'm smiling, because it's
mm.
like I love the reminder.
Do you know what's the struggle here? The struggle here is that I feel like it's really hard to put it out to the world that here is us, a therapist, and what we say to people is that there is no agenda.
Mm.
And it's like people are like, what do you mean there's no agenda? I want the agenda, but
Yeah,
where's the result? But where's
yeah.
this? But
I
there's that.
come here for a reason.
Yeah, and I clearly, the agenda to me, if I was to name an agenda, that my agenda is for when the client comes to see me, I create conditions so they can meet themselves fully with support.
Yep.
Like it's that.
Hang on. I want to say that again. I create the conditions so they can meet themselves fully with support. Yep. End of podcast.
Done.
That's a wrap.
Let's
See
go
you
home.
later.
Hmm.
'Cause
Hmm.
that's the clarity around the
Hmm.
no agenda thing,
Hmm.
because that's where the magic emerges from. If they can feel safe to be in
Hmm.
whatever is emerging, and to be able to maybe feel it and maybe
Hmm.
start to
Hmm.
accept it and see what's on the other side of it
Hmm.
and map it and
Hmm.
explore it. And we can't say what the outcome of that is. Like you
Hmm.
said, you went to therapy because it was like, I wanted a bit more happiness, a bit more content. And what you got was choice and freedom.
Hmm.
You got upgraded. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? So, like,
There is a cost to it. There is a cost of realizing, oh wow, a big part of therapy, and that journey is to step into that adulthood of realizing, oh wow, like all these ideas that I may have about how I should be and what's the best thing here,
mm,
and that I think that cost, like the pain of dropping the illusions of it can be painful.
mm,
Therapy can be so painful. Dropping the illusions of wanting that experience back there to be perfect or good, or
mm,
and it didn't happen, and like just touching on the pain of things that happened or didn't happen in the past. Ugh.
mm. Can we stay with that and be with that a little bit
Mm,
more than what we normally would,
mm,
rather than jumping to the change, jumping to the
mm,
solution?
mm.
Yeah.
So it's hard to sort of come out and say to in a context of a dominant culture that is very driven by
Outcomes.
outcomes, results, and generally speaking, intolerant to suffering to begin with.
Yeah. Yep.
It's yeah. I
Mm.
feel like I'm exhausted again just naming that.
Yeah. There's a lot in it.
Yeah.
So then how is your therapy practice different to that westernized, results driven?
Mm.
And I think you've already answered the question to a
Mm.
degree around
Mm.
that, the environment for them to meet
Mm.
themselves. But even in that, I'm thinking about people listening. Like, some people have some fear around meeting themselves.
Mm. I always feel like, we there's a risk there of trying to convince someone
Mm.
that therapy is good. It's not good for everyone. I
Yep.
agree. Maybe some people don't need it. Maybe some people need some kind of different therapy than gestalt, and that's okay. Um, I I really believe that there are so many ways of being in the world, and what I'm bringing, it's what I'm bringing,
Mm.
and it might be for some people, and they will love it, and it might be just good enough for others, and it might be something completely yeah, not okay
Yeah.
for certain people. So does it make sense?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's
completely.
almost like, well,
It's nearly a subjective,
yeah,
experience.
yeah. So different in a sense that it's. I believe that Gestalt therapy is unique and has a lot to offer, but I would never say that that's the only way.
Yeah.
Or
It also has its
therapy is the
limitations, doesn't it?
yeah, it's got limitations
Mm.
for sure. Yeah, how it's different. Well, I don't know. I'm just me. I'm
Yeah.
just doing the thing.
Yeah. You have your lived experience. Yeah.
Mm. A therapist with an accent. Don't know.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Got some good Russian vigor,
Yeah.
I like it. Um, because I'm in the middle of doing my masters.
Mm,
I've got my student hat on. I'm learning, and I've just started doing more CTOs,
mm,
client therapist observer, and for this year, I'm for the first time really taking a bit of a critical look at how I do therapy and
mm,
what are the strengths and what are the
mm,
weaknesses and what are my edges and all that sort of stuff. I'm curious about like your evolution in that role of like when you transition from student to now
mm,
kind of moving like second, third, fourth year into
mm,
being in the therapist chair
mm,
more. What were some of the challenges that you found as a therapist as you were evolving?
mm. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that yes, I've been where you are right now. So,
Mm,
and I remember stepping into that and questioning the choice points. I remember what was one of the hardest one, like a sort of, oh, do I go here? Do I go there? And kind of
mm,
really getting caught up in that point with the client. I would get so freaked out because I wouldn't know where to go from maybe a point of depth, or just kind of jump into, that cognitive. Oh, do I ask them about what they just said, or
mm.
what's, just sort of that,
They're all in.
yeah, sort of bit of a panic
All,
mode. And I met, and it gets better, sort of, it gets easier, I think, as we progress in the course. And the course is designed to support us to kind of, that's what the supervision is for.
mm,
So I think that if I was to answer this question in a more interesting way, I'd probably go with
that's hilarious. If
um,
I'd been more interesting, I would say.
I would probably go with something more personal,
Mm,
as me, as not as, I
mm.
know, someone who's doing the study, but
As a human.
as a human, as a person with their own, you know, story, and just realizing that even if whatever is going, like, that was my, this is the interesting bit, just realizing that I could have a lot going on and I don't have to have it all worked out, but
Mm,
I can come in to the room and sit down in the therapist chair and do really good work.
yep.
Because somehow, that bit I had to kind of navigate, because there's part of me that the I thought, well, oh, I had to work this all out, and I
Mm,
had
you
to
need to
be that,
complete a jigsaw puzzle.
yeah, that, and I'm naturally, I'm quite an emotional person. I get moved and I get tears easily. Um, I can get angry and really kind of tune into my anger, and so I suppose the inner critic was like, well, you haven't got it all, sorted or something to sit in the there. Like, I mean, there's this, like, also, they interject the idea of
Like the imposter even.
how we're meant to be,
Yep.
and just letting that go. Yeah, that took time.
Yep. I've found in my own practice this year, because it's on that same sort of theme, one of my most powerful questions that I'm trying to ask more, it's more a statement, is like, I don't know where to go from here.
Mm,
And then openly up to both of us, like, where do you want to take
mm,
this? And this time last year, my ego would not let me say that
mm,
statement because it was the presumption that I didn't know what I was doing. So it's interesting for me to be more comfortable, only slightly more comfortable, to say that statement of like, I don't know, and to bring that out rather than be like in my head going, fuck, I don't know. Where am I going to go with this?
mm,
Whereas last year, that was just a admission of not being smart enough.
mm,
And I actually said it in a session today, there's some real relief in like being human.
mm,
I mean, like, I don't know. There's about 4 different directions we can take this. Where do you want to go with this? And the old me was like, you have to be the guide. You have to be the one that like steers
mhm.
the ship. And
Yeah.
so I'm only just starting on that work of like
Mhm,
being courageous enough to step into it
mhm.
and let the ego kind of do a little jitter. But it's super interesting. Yeah.
As you were saying, I've yeah, sort of reflected on, obviously English is not my native language,
Mm.
so, and probably it can be obvious when I'm like, trying to find the right word, and I'm like, blah, 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 like, sort of, and uh, that is just being in the country where, the English is the language everyone speaks, and having to adapt the ways people speak and mimic sometimes,
Yep.
uh, but still, I'm still a girl who grew up in Russia. I moved here when I was 24, so the way thoughts being formulated in my head, they can be quite Russian in the sense,
Yeah.
and not allowing that to sort of, not allowing that in my process, and it's still showing up, and still, I'm here talking to you, and it, I know I get sometimes sort of like, oh, what's the right word, or just still, but still being here doing that,
Yep.
I almost let almost like I've learned to develop that trust that I'm just letting it out there, and I have enough resource in me. If someone says, oh, well, you're not making any sense, or, oh, well, how come you don't know what to do? You're meant to know what to do because you're in a therapist chair. I kind of feel like I've learned a way to be with this in a trusting sense. I've learned to be like, oh, well, that's okay. It's out there. And,
Mm.
you know, if parts of it, someone's questioning parts of it or judging, or even if I do it to myself, I'm like, well, at least it's out there.
Yeah.
How great.
Yeah.
Wow. That's the freedom. Like, that's the bit.
Yeah. Yep. At least it's out there.
At least it's out there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool, isn't
It's
it?
not just spinning around up
Yeah.
there.
Because then I don't make it this decision for everyone else.
Mm.
they can they can
Mm.
listen, people can listen to this and be like, yeah, some good points.
Yeah. Or I've got no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Or bloody confusing. I've
Mm.
lost the plot.
Mm.
Sorry. Next one.
Yeah. But I think that, like, if we tease this out a little bit, it's like, it's not making assumptions about how people will perceive things. It's actually
Mm,
road testing it.
mm, mm.
And that in itself is super powerful just in life, you know?
And there's that gestalt, the gestalt prayer that Fritz Perls wrote, and there's huge criticism around what it says, but I still truly believe like that what it brings to me is that freedom that, I do my bit and I show up the way I can, and you do your bit and you show up the way you can, and if we meet, that's great, but if we don't, that can't be helped, and there's something in it that I'm not making decisions for you of
Yep.
how you're perceiving me. I'm not making assumptions, and that I'm just letting you be you and I'm letting myself be me. And there is, you got to have some ground to do that. It's a risky ground because
Yep.
it's easier to sit here and think, oh, what does this Rick want me to say? So the podcast turns out to be more, juicy, interesting, whatever, or yeah, like I'm risking,
Mm.
but I have to have some ground. I have to build something that allows me to risk like that.
Yeah.
And that's the work.
Mm. And I feel like underneath that, by doing that, by risking and bringing it to between the two of you, it deconstructs that dominance part of like the therapist is the boss. Or even in this situation, like that, I'm the host and I ask the question. Like, it's just not that. It's like, this is a conversation and we're both bringing whatever emerges at the time, I often, when I ask people to come on the podcast, they're like, yeah, just shoot me through the questions. I'm like, there are no questions. We just make it up. And it's really unnerving for some people to not pre-prepare answers. And I get it because it's pretty rare, especially knowing that it's, it's going to be in the public domain. What if I make a fool of myself? What if I say something wrong? What if I get it wrong? You know, and this is what I find the really interesting part is like this, what do I make it mean about me if, it's this meaning making part.
What would it mean? Yeah, what would it mean to show up so imperfectly?
Yeah. You have to start a podcast called Humaning, and so you got permission to just fuck it
Yay!
up.
But I think that, there are tools to navigate that. And one of the greatest ones is like, and what? And, okay, yep, and you don't know, and you just stuffed it up, and you made a fool of yourself. So what?
Mm.
Oh, this and that and this and that. Okay, and so what? And what it means for you? Well, so like you can chase it to the root.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
Mm.
That's an interesting one.
Mm.
I've been thinking a lot about the power of the full stop,
Mm.
which is
Tell me more.
It's kind of just made me think about because it's kind of the opposite of what you were
Mm-hmm.
just talking about as the and.
Where everything has got a
Yeah,
polarity.
is there more?
Yeah.
I find it in that in the side of gestalt where we share resonance,
Mm.
and it's often the resonance is, when I heard you say this, I felt this.
So the resonance, I suppose, was sort of created so people don't override someone's
Yeah.
experience.
So
Yeah.
this
So
is
it's got a very delicate purpose in.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is exactly the point I'm making.
Yeah.
It's like the power of the full stop is abused because if I'm sitting here and I'm really feeling your story, and when you speak about Russia, I really feel that full stop rather than I really feel that. And it reminds me of when I was 16 and I was living on a farm and I probably had it a bit harder than you, but, it's pretty similar.
Mm.
Like, whoa, use your full stop,
Mm.
and many of us, me included, have this desire to like keep telling
Mm-hmm.
stories. And I think there's a really beautiful power in just say the sentence
Mm.
and use the full stop and let it sit without the need to keep filling it with words
Mm.
and more justifications and rationale and hijacking and
Mm.
one-upping and all the things that happen in that. It's part of my work is like, can I be more full stoppy? Can I shut up more?
Well, and I'm instantly thinking, well, okay, so and was this need to keep going and adding and I'd
Mm.
be interested in that.
I think for me
What's the need
personally,
there? Like, why do we do that? Like why it feels so and it's so natural to humans to do.
100%.
Like this is the way we talk a
It's
lot.
kind of the way we listen
Yeah.
or don't
Yes.
listen.
But like when it goes on and you adding and
Mm.
you're fluffing about and you lost the track and
Mm.
we're still adding. So that is what yeah, I'm wondering what's driving that?
I think it's from my experience of being pretty bad at this in the past, or actually being really good at it in the past
Mm,
in a bad way.
mm,
I felt like I needed to be valuable in the conversation and get my points
mm,
across. And now when I hear it, I think it just activates that part of me. It's like, oh, I used to do that and I used to hurt.
mm,
Like I used to encroach on someone's moment, time,
mm,
experience by imprinting my stuff unsolicited,
mm,
you know? So and we have it in men's circle and we have a rule about resonance
mm,
and it's a constant battle of where can we can we use our full stop please in the resonance
mm,
because we
mm,
want it just to be about the resonance, not about the story.
mm.
And yeah.
Everything has this purpose.
Mm.
I think and what if has a purpose to go deeper and
Yeah,
explore
yeah.
something and get to the root of something. And I imagine at times it should be like, yeah, that's it, I'm done.
Mm.
Full stop. I don't think they're inherently good or
No.
bad. They probably just they have their place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really beautiful point
Mm.
because um, a younger version of me wanted to get it right.
Mm.
And to get it right, there had to be a right and a wrong.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's bad, that's good. And I think over the last couple of years, I'm really learning that there's light and shadow to everything. And there's a little time and a place where it's super important to do that. There's a time and place where the opposite
Mm.
is going to be awesome. And I think for me personally, it's meant that I've get to let go of the defensiveness of being right.
Mm.
How personal that I made
Mm.
that because everything's got some flow
Mm.
in it.
Mm.
And what that's meant in my life is that by being taking things less personally about being right, I'm less defensive. Therefore, I'm not needing to step in and go, no, that's wrong. It's this, and just be like, oh,
Mm.
maybe that's good, but it could also be
I
that.
think with if I bring a little bit of Gestalt theory, there's a um, idea of a complex figure, and complex figure is just it's a sophisticated something we think about,
Mm-hmm.
and what we tend to do, we tend to simplify because it's just easier, and because the brain also, brain is quite keen to kind of pin
Simplify.
it down
Yeah.
and put it in a so the reason why we use sort of description as a way of talking about something and description with the full awareness of the details is that that allows us to unpack the complexity of the experience.
Mm.
So, in a sense, if I'm talking about something that is, oh, this is good and this is bad, if I go and how bad and how good and what's in between and what's happening, so I'm creating more complexity in a way to my perception of something. So therefore I'm coming out of that polarity thinking, oh, this is good or bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what it can help to create places where, at times we feel like we have to make a choice, one or the
Yeah.
other. And if we dig deeper, we could probably find out that, I could just hold the place of not choosing anything yet, and that, and just hold this place with awareness, and then just there is more to the picture.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, I don't know, we tend, and I think this is also the work, we tend to have a very solid, simple ideas, and as the part of therapy is coming to realization that, oh well, that's not as solid as I thought, that's not as rigid, that has some room. Oh wow, I'm becoming a little bit more flexible about something.
Choice.
Yeah, the choice coming in.
Mm.
um but to do that, it means that, those solid structures we relied on for so long,
Yeah.
we're kind of got to shake them a little bit. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because if I believe in something, that something is right, there is no room for me,
Mm.
you know, to let the idea then that, oh, it might not be, depends
Yeah.
on the context,
Yeah.
on the situation.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm. And I'm still thinking about, like, because I love that idea of it being
Mm.
teased out a little bit to expand. And there's still a little part in me that um, yearns to know,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
and is uncomfortable when he doesn't know. And I'm not sure that um, he's ever not going to be present. You know,
Mm.
he might be a bit quieter
Mm.
sometimes, but there's a little knower in there, and I get something from knowing. You
Mhm.
know, dog just jumped on my lap.
Mm.
Hello. You know, you know, it's interesting. So yeah, it's interesting to think about. In my experience, and personally, around the combination or the connection between knowing and value
Mm.
for me,
Mm.
worthiness, being validated, you know. And so then I come back to that question. If I speak to my client, like, I don't know. So for me to say that there's a lot of weight in that.
Mm.
Of There's a lot of perception, for personal perception around that.
Mm. Mm.
Mm.
I think most of us desperately trying to show that we know stuff and we know how to do stuff, but ultimately, the what's embedded in being human is uncertainty, um and the coping mechanisms around how we deal with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I am uncomfortable with uncertainty,
Mm.
100%, and I'll fully own it.
Mm.
And yet, I'd like to also lean into the idea that there is a lot of resource in uncertainty because it's not predetermined. So there
Mm.
is some, I don't know, as I say it, I kind of feel like I want to take a deeper breath, like, oh, there might be some benefits in uncertainty sometimes. I just want to like throw that one in.
Flesh that out a bit for me, because
Yeah.
I'm really interested in that, around some of the benefits of uncertainty.
Exploring new experience can feel like, can feel like uncertainty.
Mhm.
Being here with you, and yes, it's our second try at podcast, but it's here with me now. Like, oh, how like we're nearly finished, but there's a sense of, there was that, the entire podcast, I felt like, oh well, it is still uncertain
Mm.
how it's going to be and what we're going to talk about. And that, leaning into that, allowed me to kind of just be here and just talk about whatever was emerging,
Yeah.
for you and for me, and be more in the moment. And I feel really moved by that. I feel really alive in
Mm.
that. Because if we had a set of things we were meant to talk about, and you're like, Katia, do not talk about this bit, and do talk about this bit, and you're very directive, it would have been comforting, and because it's predetermined, I'd be like, yeah, cool. And I mean, we had some guide,
Mm.
on what we wanted to touch on today, but it was like really vague and that's Rick
Yeah.
style, that's okay. But uh, uh, but
But there's some benefit
essentially,
in that uncertainty of not knowing.
yeah. It allows to be more present
Yeah.
sometimes. If we're willing to deal with discomfort of the anxiety
Yeah.
and the desperate need to make it certain.
Yeah.
My experience of that, if I have that desperate need to make something certain, maybe I need to come back to myself and stay present and sort of be like, oh, okay,
Mm.
what's it's like not to be certain? I was like, no, 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 fuck that. I don't want
Yeah.
that right now. I've had too much uncertainty. And yet, at times, it's all around me and I have no control over it. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? Maybe I could just lean into it and maybe I could
Mm.
just let it unfold and be in the moment. Yeah. Because the moment, the present moment, sometimes, like, isn't it? Don't you think that I can have so many things in my life, but ultimately the only thing that I have is the present moment?
Right now.
Mm,
Yeah. And what I'm taking from what you're saying is
mm,
there are some real tangible benefits of building the muscle of sitting in
mm,
uncertainty, because then there's the opportunity, there's more of the opportunity to let whatever's going to unfold
mm,
unfold without pushing it or forcing
mm.
it or striving for it.
And then conversations like this matter
Mm.
because what we're doing here, we're saying something different to how the world is actually set up.
Yeah.
And also, what we're saying that we're bringing that idea of relational. We are uncertain together, as collective.
Yeah.
And what it would be like to sit in front of each other and say, hey, I'm unsure about some stuff. Bothers me. I don't know. I don't know
Mm.
what's going to happen. And then, the other is
Being that
saying,
together.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then the other saying, you know what? I'm unsure too.
Because we actually had that conversation before we started.
Yeah.
I don't know what this looks like
Yeah.
because we've already kind of done a version of it. And I'm like, me either.
Mm.
Can we talk about that?
Mm.
Mm.
So it feels important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think the caveat is it makes sense to hunt certainty.
Mm.
Like that makes sense.
Mm.
And it doesn't always have to be the default.
Mm.
Mm. I think that's a beautiful place to
Mm-hmm.
uncertainly finish the podcast. But yeah, I love that that's emerged.
Mm. It, yeah, I suppose, reflecting on our first try, I loved the first podcast, and gosh, I wish we had a chance to,
Get it
I
out
don't
in the
know, get
world.
it out.
Mm.
Um, but maybe we didn't quite get to such important things.
Mm.
So, did we do it better? I don't know. Does it feel to me that what we've talked here today was way more important and I don't know, there's a sense
Meaningful.
of, yeah, meaningful. M- Probably yes. I want to say
Mm.
yes. Yes.
Mm.
That excites
Are you
me.
certain about that?
Yeah. I'm certain about that one. Um, it, look, in a sense that these are the important conversations,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
I want our voices be out there. So broadcasting that.
That it's okay to be human together. It's
Mm,
okay to be uncertain. It's
mm,
okay to be in this
mm.
experience together.
It's almost like the perfectionism and what we're talking about in the first podcast was sort of the iceberg that gave us that chance to kind of descend a little bit
Mm.
deeper. So one could only hope,
Yeah.
that emerged.
Yeah.
I'm very glad.
Yeah. Me too.
Mm.
So I still, if I fall into podcast host mode,
Mm.
which I'm not that good at,
Mm.
um, I do like to finish on the question of like what excites you, whether it's from
Mm.
today or whether it's in life at the moment or
Just stepping into private practice, and I know it's a long process,
mm,
and I'm humbled by the challenge,
yeah,
but I've called the practice relational home because there's just so much meaning for me in that.
yep,
And I think what we're talking about today just really kind of, broadcasts my values
yeah,
and what kind of stands behind mm, this practice and who I am.
yeah,
That excites me.
yeah. Excites me too. Excites me to watch your story
Yeah.
unfold. With all of that.
Yeah. And it's uncertain.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, and it's okay. Yeah. And I'm hopeful that the more conversations like that happen, that the world gets a bit better, a bit easier.
Mm,
I just hope people will have, that sense, I can breathe easier just knowing that there's someone there thinking like that,
yeah.
because then it allows me to think like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm, that's a nice one to finish on.
Mm.
And yeah, the the part of me that wants to help your business is like jump in the show notes and get in contact with Katia because
I
she's
appreciate
amazing.
that. Thank
But
you.
yeah, all that'll be in there, and
Mm.
um, yeah. And I think if I ask myself the same question
Mm.
around what excites me, I turned 48 on Saturday, and just life in general is pretty exciting
Mm.
at the moment. I have a lot of it feels like there's more peace than I've experienced in a really long time,
Mm.
and I'm fucking here for that.
Good.
And I'm excited that I'm open to the uncertainty of
Mhm.
what unfolds now, more so than I've needed to be in the past.
Mhm.
Um, I'm I'm happy for the universe to surprise me
Mhm.
in both directions.
Well, it sounds like you have plenty of surprises for the universe too. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, I didn't know what I wanted from being a certain age. I never kind of think like that,
Mm.
but it's always like an interesting time of the year to reflect.
Mhm.
And I think I'm reflecting with a smile on my face at the moment.
Mm.
So I'm excited to be 48 on Saturday and
Mhm.
you know, share some time with people I love and
Mm.
not need it to be any different than it is.
Mm. Yeah, that sounds like a place where there is, that piece of acceptance, and how liberating is just to drop those ideas of, if I'm a certain age, I was meant to be this
Mm.
and that and this and that, and it's sort of just that's again like that, like what you just said. It supports again what we're talking about,
Mm.
as that piece around just letting it be, and there is some freedom in just dropping the expectations, the ideas. And also how hard it might have been if you had one or two you had to wrestle with,
Yeah.
and they can creep up sometimes. But as long as, they can creep up, don't they? They
They
kind of
creeped up on me in the
randomly,
last couple of weeks.
they randomly kind of, and then, it's a work. It's not something, I don't think it's something we just do and then boom, we're good.
That's been the benefit the last couple of weeks for me, is being humbled. Being humbled to be like, and more, and being okay with that. Well, thank you so much for the effort it takes to get here and to come back and re-record, and to bring your dog that's sitting on my knee right now. My dog
She's
is outside.
very content.
Yeah,
she's very happy sitting on your lap.
Yeah, we haven't done a podcast with a lap dog before, so this is new. And I would love to have you back and continue more conversations.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Katia. And hey, before you head off, I just wanted to say thanks for listening to that conversation. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate if you followed the podcast on Spotify, left a review, or even just left a comment and let me know what you got from the podcast. Those little bits of interaction mean a lot. We're not doing any promo or ads, or we're not selling anything on this podcast. So the goal is just to get these conversations into more people's ears. So if you've got a spare 30 seconds, really appreciate those little steps that help this grow. Okay, we'll see you in the next one.